Recording in progress.
This segment is all about selling your business in today's economy. Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial, and this segment's brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals publish to lead their fields, educate consumers, and to leave a legacy. Joining me on this segment is Robert Clements. He's a partner at Benchmark Business Group. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Robert, tell us a little bit about your work and specifically who are the types of clients that you specialize in helping?
Well, our company is a little unusual in that we started about 24 years ago as a coaching and consulting company, and about 13 years ago we brought on the brokerage. So our work with clients is soup to nuts. I mean, we might have startups, we might have people who are trying to grow, but then we have a lot of people that are getting ready to sell, and brokerage obviously is a very big part of our business. Our marketplace in brokerage is, I would call it upper Main Street, meaning about half our businesses are well over $1 million in value, and the other half are under $1 million. So it's all the way from the Main Street business on up to just below something that everybody calls middle market, you know. And so it's construction businesses, distribution companies, business services, just any kind of business that you can imagine. We're agnostic when it comes to the type of business, so we serve a lot of different kinds of industries.
With these business owners that you work with, they're great at growing their businesses, but how much thought do they really put into selling the business? What's their biggest challenge?
Oh, that's a great question. We just developed over the last 3 years something called seller insights, because we found that the biggest barrier to most closings is the seller themselves. They really don't understand the selling process. They don't understand what it means to be ready for that. It's like when they start a business, they know how to make a widget, but they don't know how to run a business that makes a widget. And then eventually they figure that out, and now that they know how to run a company that makes a widget, they don't know how to sell a company that makes a widget. So it's the same conundrum that they were in before. So you know the issues really are that they don't understand what the negotiating process is all about. They become a little bit too emotional about it sometimes. Buyers obviously are there to get the best deal they can, and the sellers are there to get the best deal they can. So there's a little bit of an emotional tug of war that goes on. But then there's also an extensive due diligence process the seller needs to know how to navigate and be ready for. We help the sellers understand what their ideal deal is and their bottom line deal, so they know where their negotiating room is and so on. So there's a whole learning process, but we actually put sellers through 3 hours of coaching before they ever, get into the marketplace, so that they really understand the process.
So it really sounds like this is not like selling a house, for example. Speaking of that, are there a lot of myths or misconceptions that they hold, sort of like, hey, this should be as easy as selling a house?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of business owners when they come into the process. First of all, they are a little surprised at the amount of time it takes. It'll take several months to a year to really sell a business. They're surprised at the preparation work that goes into it. Sometimes they're surprised at the cost of doing it. It's much more complicated than selling a house by far. We are also licensed realtors, because oftentimes there's a realty attached to the business or involved in the sale. But that's a sort of incidental part of the sale. It's the business itself that is really the difficult challenge. And you go to market blind. In other words, you go to market confidentially without naming the business or where it is, only kind of what it does and what the numbers are. So you send a teaser out there and try to attract people to it. It's not like putting a for sale sign in the window. You don't do that, because people don't want their employees to know. Oftentimes they don't want their customers to know and until the very last minute. So we're looking for a needle in a haystack with a blind circular.
Hey, that's a really great point. That confidentiality adds another challenge to selling the property. And to use the analogy of a house, we know that most houses pretty much sell, but that's not quite the case with businesses, right? What's the success rate of selling businesses today? And tell us, like, what's the difference between a successful business that will sell, that's sellable, and one that will not?
Well, to answer your first question, the national rate is about 50%. So about 50% of the businesses that list actually sell. Our rate, we've been able to climb to about 60 or a little over 60% now because of the preparation that we do and some of that other stuff. But they don't all sell. The more saleable businesses are, they show a good they show a good positive cash flow. They're financially well organized so that the questions regarding their finances can be answered clearly and concisely and quickly. They are not as owner dependent. In other words, the more owner dependent they are, the harder they are to sell unless somebody's trying to buy a job, right? The more the business has recurring or reoccurring revenue, so it's well branded, it's got a lot of history in the marketplace, the more likely it's going to sell, because that gives the buyer and the buyer's bank, don't forget the buyer's bank, a lot of confidence in the ability of that business to continue to operate like it did when the seller owned it.
Really great insight. Let's talk about, like, when's a good time to sell a business? Is there such thing as a good or a bad time to sell a business? And talk about, like, today's climate, post-pandemic.
Well, I'll use a sort of a hokey analogy that I sometimes use. You don't try to sell a horse when it's lame. In other words, the best time to sell a business is when it's operating well. And oftentimes that's the paradox, because the owner wants to keep it as long as it's operating well. I mean, why sell it? It's making great money. But really, if the owner knows that sometime in the future they're going to need to sell their business or want to sell their business because they want to change their lifestyle, or they want to move on, or they want to, maybe they're getting some pressure from their spouse to finally retire or something like that, they need to be thinking about doing that when the business is running well. And so oftentimes we like getting business owners contacting us maybe a little before they're ready to sell, so that we have some time to help them create some better curb appeal for the business, right? And get their finances in order and all of that. There's a lot that can be done to help the business be worth more when it does come time to sell.
Robert, what inspired you to get into this field and help business owners sell their businesses? How did you get started?
Well, next year I'm going to celebrate my 50th anniversary as a licensed attorney. So for about 30 years I practiced law, and I did a lot of mergers and acquisition work, and I did a lot of business formation and so on. My wife and I started this company 24 years ago because I decided that there was a better way to represent small business or help small business than wait for the train to wreck and then help them. I wanted to help them before that happened, and so we got into the business of business development about 24 years ago. And then at the end of the last recession, 2010, a friend of mine who owned a brokerage business, who I knew, his son then owned it. I guess he had sold it to his son. They decided to shut it down because the banks weren't loaning money at the time and so on. So I decided to buy the rights to it, and decided to get our business into the brokerage business because it was just another side to the same coin. In other words, you're either growing the business or you're selling it, one of the two. And so we decided to just add that to our mix. This has been a great way. I think my wife and I are both really, we're kind of business junkies. We're both focused on helping business owners get the very, very best experience that they can out of their business. It's very gratifying to us.
That's terrific. Before I ask you my last question, in regards to selling a business in today's climate, is there anything that I didn't think to ask you that you think is really important to share with business owners today?
Well, only that, we're hearing a lot of news about, inflation and the interest rates going up and all of that. That's really not slowing things down at all in terms of business sales. Most businesses earn, anywhere from 20 to 30% returns in many cases, and maybe sometimes not that much, but they earn returns that are much larger than what you see in terms of interest rates. So when the interest rate bumps 2 or 3 or 4 points, it's not necessarily going to impact the value of businesses. I think when you get into the middle market and the upper markets where the numbers are a lot larger, it does have some impact, but we've seen very strong activity at this point in the economy. Our numbers are buyer inquiries, for example, this year are double year over year what they were last year and the year before. So there's a lot of activity out there, and so I don't think people need to be afraid of any of that when it comes to any of the other economic news that they're hearing.
Sage advice for business owners listening who would love to speak with you and perhaps get your help. How can they find you and connect with you?
Well, they can email me, or they can go on our website is www.benchmarkbusinessgroup.com, and my email is rclements, RCLEMENTS @benchmarkbusinessgroup.com, all spelled out. and that's probably the quickest way. And we can, we always have a kind of an introductory chat with people. It doesn't cost anything to find out information, and I'm having those kinds of conversations every day of the week. So I'll be happy to talk to anybody that wants to contact me.
Fantastic. Robert, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with my audience today, and I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mark.
That was Robert Clements, a partner at Benchmark Business Group. And this segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get published to lead their fields, educate consumers, and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining me.